The Singapore GP has been overshadowed by the FIA's decision to penalise Max Verstappen for using foul language, as it seems like the three-time world champion would have to serve a penalty from a community service nature, something that is yet to be cleared by the governing body. This has caused a lot of anger among the F1 drivers, as they are now set to have a meeting over this situation and will very likely apply a lot of pressure to the FIA to change some of the rules that they feel make no sense at all. With Verstappen leading the charge and the war against the FIA, can the drivers actually gain something from this? And is this a direct threat for Ben Sulayem's reign as the president of the governing body? It goes without saying that the most controversial topic in the world of Formula One right now is the penalty that Verstappen received for using explicit language, or more precisely, the F word. This has been understood to be a very big concern for the other F1 drivers because it's not applied exclusively to Verstappen. When you're driving 300 kilometers per hour and something is not going your way, you do tend to be a bit more foul-mouthed than usual, even though some of the drivers have the character to hold back these words and elaborate on the situation in a more traditional and accepting way. But nevertheless, this is a sport in which the contestants are always under the microphone, which, if being implemented in football or basketball, would be quite absurd to compare, as we're not always listening to what these athletes have to say, unlike in Formula One. Whenever a feedback is given to a team, drivers do tend to use the S or the F word for certain characteristics of the car, the tyres, or a move that someone did ahead of them that almost ended the race without them being at fault. So under the influence of all the adrenaline and the heat of the moment, foul language has of course been and will continue to be part of the sport. However, Ben Sulayem believes that this is something that should change sooner rather than later, with proper politics being implemented in the sport. But the F1 drivers have had enough, as they are now ready to discuss these things in a private meeting where they would come to a common statement that would then be shared to the FIA. And the fact that even the FIA didn't understand the penalty that they gave to Verstappen, labelling it as community service, which could very well mean that we might see Verstappen being a marshal and cleaning the track in Austin for all we know. But it does go to show that while the governing body wants to be effective with their penalties, sometimes the nature of them are truly deserving for a mockery from the F1 world. What we must not forget is that what Verstappen does is not a novelty in the sport. Just take Günther Steiner into consideration. The former team principal of Haas used profanity in his language for so long that he would have to do tons of community service penalties if he was still present as a team principal. Therefore, to try and implement it from today just makes zero sense at all. And this is a primary reason why drivers like Hamilton and Norris have decided to defend Verstappen publicly during the press conference in Singapore, with the seven-time world champion stating that the penalty itself is absurd, and if he was in Verstappen's position, he wouldn't have done it. Another absurdity, if you think about it, Steiner has been glorified by Netflix and the entire F1 community by using the F word. So why penalise a driver when he has a proper reason to use it and symbolise a figure of the sport who said it through casual conversations and made a popular name of himself? It's something that the FIA really does need to work on very heavily, and this is something that Alex Wirtz, the chairman of the GPDA, has tweeted about, stating, how many lifetime community services would Steiner have to serve for using the F word? He was glorified using it. Netflix broadcast this worldwide, no problem. But then to suddenly change like that, I have to say the choice of words is not my personal taste as a driver. As GPDA chairman, I have to officially say that we will, of course, discuss it internally, first reach a full consensus, and then we will consider whether and in what form we will talk to the FIA and the president. On the other hand, situations like this are definitely starting to hurt the future of Formula One drivers, especially Max Verstappen, who already stated on many occasions that he is not willing to drive well into his 40s like some of the legends like Hamilton and Alonso right now. When praising the effect of Ricciardo in the sport, Max hinted that when he retires in a couple of years' time, both of them can have a beer and a laugh about all the good moments they've been through together, and that period might have been pushed a bit closer after what happened with the governing body recently. When talking outside of the conference room after his small protest with giving short answers to the journalists, Verstappen was asked whether the actions from the FIA are affecting his future in the sport, to which he gave a long and very precise answer, saying, "For sure, yeah, I mean, these kinds of things definitely decide my future as well. When you can't be yourself, you have to deal with these kinds of silly things. I think now I am at a stage of my career that I don't want to be dealing with this all the time. It's really tiring. Of course, it's great to have success and win races, but once you have accomplished all that, winning championships and races, then you just want to have a good time as well. Everyone is pushing to the limit, everyone in this battle, even at the back of the grid. But if you have to deal with all these kind of silly things, for me, that is not a way of continuing in the sport, that is for sure." One of the solutions that was proposed by Ben Sulayem is to have the broadcasting with this foul language banned from the TV, but that would make no sense because this is the only way that the viewers are feeling connected with the drivers and their personal feel with the car or their emotions towards a certain driver. All of this is making the entire situation a very difficult one to handle, and Verstappen himself has admitted that it's very silly to be discussing such things when there are bigger problems that the sport needs to deal with. We must remind you also that the F1 caravan still visits circuits in countries that are notorious for their human rights, and after all the scandals with Horner, using the F word being the biggest bombshell of the sport does seem a little bit of a paradox that maybe we should get over sooner rather than later. When talking about the entire swearing scandal, Verstappen hinted that the kids would eventually swear in their lives, whether that would be now or a couple of years later, and his swearing isn't something personal or abusive, as he elaborated. "I mean, it's not even that bad, right? I mean, the car was not working, the car was effed. And then, excuse me for the language, but come on, what are we? 5-year-old, 6-year-old, even a 5-year-old or 6-year-old is watching, they will eventually swear anyway. Even if the parents won't or they will not allow it, when they grow up, they will talk around with their friends and they will be swearing. So, you know, this is not changing anything. I think you will swear anyway. If it's not in this room, maybe somewhere else. Everyone swears. Some people a bit more than others. It also depends on what language you speak. Of course, abuse is something else, but I think a lot of things get broadcast nowadays where in other sports you don't run around with a mic attached to you. I think a lot of people say a lot of bad things when they are full of adrenaline. In other sports, it just doesn't get picked up. Nevertheless, it's up to the FIA to confirm what type of penalty Verstappen would be forced to serve, and more importantly, whether or not they will succumb under the pressure from the F1 drivers and pull back on the penalty. What this would mean is that the foul language would be used even more, which will throw a shade towards the integrity of the governing body. So with all this in mind, do you think that Verstappen and the rest of the grid are in the right when it comes to swearing being a constitutional and integral part of the sport? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.